Does the hammer restrict the creative possibilities of the sculptor? Yes and no, because yes, the material quality of the hammer makes it possible to work on the material only in a certain way, but it makes possible to, you know, be very forceful, for instance, against a piece of stone or metal. And the same goes for digital technologies, that there are some things which you can do with them which are made possible in the first place by digital technologies. And there are other things which they inhibit or make more complicated. You know, for instance, when you're working with color and you want to create complicated color schemes, then very often the computer is not a very good tool, because the way in which you can lay out color on a computer screen is rather limited. And you can do much more subtle things when you're using paint. But if you want to create generative systems that continuously change, and if you want to deal with social situations, you know, want to reflect on the way in which social situations are changing continuously, you find a metaphor for that, for instance, in the digital field, then, you know, digital technologies can be the only or a very appropriate way for doing that. And I think that some of the works which I showed at the talk yesterday are examples of things that you can only do because you're using digital technologies. So I think that, as with any other medium, artists who work with these technologies have to be aware of the limitations and the possibilities, the degrees of freedom that these technologies are offering. And what we are seeing increasingly, I think, is that artists more consciously choose which technology they want to apply for a specific project. Maybe 10 years ago, many artists would be using, you know, some form of new technology just because it was new. And they were just curious about what this new thing was. And in the meantime, there has been a slowdown of the technological innovation. We're not seeing so many kind of excessively new things anymore in the last years. And this slowing down has meant that artists can reflect more about what is it that they want to say, how do they want to say it, and is, for instance, the computer, a computer screen, a video, a work on the internet, a piece of software, an interactive system, are they really the appropriate ways of expressing these things? Or, you know, and then some artists go back to kind of non-digital means of expression for specific things. So I think there's a greater flexibility today, and it's, for me, I think it's the most important thing, that at the art academies, digital technologies are treated like another possibility for artistic expression. And the same way that young artists learn how to draw, how to paint, how to work with stone, or do things in public spaces, performative actions in public spaces. In the same way, I think they should be able to familiarize themselves with the aesthetic potentials of digital media. You know, when the wheel was invented, it created a whole new set of possibilities. Or when the printing press was invented, it was really a quantum leap in cultural terms. And it has, in the long run, changed the way in which literature, for instance, evolved, and the way in which literary cultures have evolved. But, you know, it's still just another technology. And I don't really believe, but this is a personal opinion, I'm not sure whether it's true, I don't really believe that digital technologies are totally different from previous analog, non-digital technologies. What's real communication? this is of course a rhetorical question because we don't know. What we describe as communication changes. And you know, for a very long time communication was only possible as you know, language, exchanging words in the same space. And the use of the telegraph and then of the telephone was a radical change in that, because suddenly communication was not tied anymore to being in the same place. There was a technological device that made it possible to communicate over long distances. The space didn't matter anymore. Mm-hmm. It had to be synchronous communication, but it didn't matter where somebody was. And the answering machine, I think, is also a fascinating step in this development, because suddenly we are entering, we have a tool for asynchronous verbal communication. So you can leave a message, I can hear your voice, but the moment when I hear it and when I decide how to respond to it is disconnected from the time when you leave that message. But you leave that message at the moment, you know, it arrives at my house or at my answering machine, the moment when you say it. This is different from a letter, because when you write the letter, you have to send it through the post and it arrives maybe 1 or 2 or 3 days later. So when it arrives at my place, the first moment that I can read it is already asynchronous with your moment of writing. And the telex was a possibility of having somebody type at the same time when I can read. Yeah. So I'm giving these historical examples to show that, you know, communication is happening in each of these situations, but it's always changing. And of course now people are getting used to the fact that when you call somebody on this mobile phone, you don't know where they are. It could be anywhere, and when they answer the phone, the only thing that you know is that they are in a network zone. Maybe at some point in the future it will be possible to see on the phone, on the device, where that other person is, because it will be connected to GPS data or something like that. But it doesn't take away the fact that those two people will be talking. And you get a different kind of intimacy. But you get a different kind of intimacy in any of those situations. Mm-hmm. So I think that there's no point to which we can refer back where we could say, okay, this is real communication and everything else doesn't count. Like, you know, the conversation that we're having now is taking place under the condition that there's a camera which is recording it, so that people will be able to replay this conversation at some other time. And the way in which we're talking is conditioned by that dispositive. Yes. So, you know, is this a real conversation? I don't know. I see my role as a cultural theorist in thinking through possible effects and observing what is going on in the world. As a curator, I have the task of encouraging artists to think, create critically about these kinds of changes, and to bring things into the world which offer a moment of hesitation, moments of doubt, moments of anger and fear about things which, you know, somebody feels is not good. I think that's the best that we can do.
Thank you very much for your time. It has been a pleasure for us.
Welcome. Thank you. Okay.